This is the Saturday Detail with Alexia Russell.
Did you know you can download the Detail from Spotify? Lots of people do. Great for us, but when it comes to music purists, are podcasts like ours just clogging up the feed? Spotify's been through a fair few changes recently in its algorithm, how songs are chosen, what artists are showcased. Some people have been thrown by those changes. Some people, like RNZ's Music 101 host Charlotte Ryan, whose own interviews with musicians, ironically, can also be found on Spotify. So she is talking to us today. Charlotte, good morning, good day.
Good day.
Greetings.
Hello. I know, I have a very torn relationship with Spotify.
Tell me what is bothering you about Spotify.
Well, can I say positive things first?
Sure.
Spotify is incredible. To have every single song that you'd ever dream of at your fingertips to listen to, every single catalogue, and then bonus sort of unreleased songs. You can get it now and listen to it anywhere you want in the world. So that is a dream. But there are many downsides to this platform as well. Number one, the most thing that everyone knows about is that artists aren't paid fairly. You know, you've got to get a lot of streams to be able to be paid.
That view is an industry staple, but is it still true? Charlotte checked it out with Mikey Tucker from Loop Recordings, who says the updated figures are better than they were. And Spotify does pay artists well. Last year, it paid out nearly $15 billion, NZ dollars, to the music industry worldwide.
I think the people that are complaining are people that in the CD era wouldn't have even got their CD on the shelf and would have been lucky to sell 100 of their gigs. And they probably just need to look at their career trajectory and place themselves in past iterations of the music industry and actually compare themselves to that. And, you know, and when you do end up, even as a medium-sized artist on Spotify, it pays well, especially if you're on an indie deal and you're going either direct or through an indie. It pays even better.
Because was it 1 million streams gets you about $3,000? Is that right?
No, that's quite a way off. I don't have the new numbers, but the last time I did the calculation, it was more like 6.
Charlotte points out that if you sold 1 million CDs, you'd get a lot more than $6,000 if we bought CDs.
If we bought the artist's CDs. But that's the other problem with Spotify, is that many of the listeners aren't listening to full albums. So music purists like myself, who love the album as a full piece of art, some artists are thinking about not even releasing albums in the future and just releasing singles, because that's the way that music listeners are listening to music on Spotify. They just get gifted all these new singles and playlists rather than being introduced to the full album.
So what, do you think Spotify has caused the death of the concept album? There'll be no more Pink Floyd The Wall ever again?
That is my fear. That is my true fear. I interviewed Delaney Davidson actually a month or so ago, and he was saying he thinks he might not ever release an album.
I realise the album format is something we're all so used to, and I'm not sure why we're hanging on to it so hardcore. The whole idea for me of an album, I'm like, so many people aren't even thinking that way. They just release singles, they put out their work as they're making it, which seems so much more natural.
Really?
So for me, I'm like, why am I hanging on to this album concept? And is the 10th album I do the last actual album? That's something I've been thinking about in my mind. I don't mind writing, and you can always cobble together enough material to fill one. But the idea of not being limited to that in terms of costings and unit production, LPs and CDs, or how we release, all those things would be so much less to take on if you just released music as you made it.
Quite a few young artists, quote unquote, they are more about releasing singles because that's what their fans listen to now on these streaming platforms. That's, you know, it's one song that will go off on TikTok, and so that will be the one song that goes off on Spotify.
So I guess though with an album, does that commit you to buying the vinyl or the CD? Or can you should you be able to sort of line up that album on Spotify and just play it through?
Well, some artists believe you should be able to line up the album and play it, right the way through, because that's the intention of how they created the piece of art. But yeah, Spotify doesn't really encourage that, I guess, in the way that it's set up. The other thing is that the format of Spotify and how it's getting people to listen to music, record companies have had to completely change album release plans. So back in the old days, you'd get 2 singles before an album came out. And then you get the album, the third single on the album release day, and that would make you buy the full album and love it. But now record companies are so scared that no one's going to listen to any of the album. So some artists are releasing 7 or 8 singles before the actual album comes out because they feel that they'll have more success with listens on these particular singles than they will on the full album. So that's another very sad thing.
So it's almost like having a best of album out before your album's out.
Yes, yeah. Or it's like creating the best of before the album comes out. Yeah.
I don't know, is that just a change in the way we have to think, or is it a bad thing?
Well, there's pros and cons to both, I think. It's a bad thing in my eyes because I'm an album purist and I love that whole concept of, gone are the days where we got so excited, got the record cover, opened it up, looked at it, listened to the record for the first time, and even did it with friends. We'd have friends over to listen to the album for the first time. That just doesn't happen now.
And all the album art too.
I know. And they don't even tell us the credits properly on Spotify. If I want to know who wrote that song, you can sort of see it, but yeah, it doesn't have many details on the song.
What proportion of New Zealanders listen to their music on Spotify?
Oh, a huge amount of New Zealanders. So many New Zealanders have Spotify, and it's because of a deal that they did with a telco a couple of years ago. If you signed up to a certain telco, I think you got a free Spotify account, and that was just when streaming was taking off in New Zealand. So I think over 1 million New Zealanders use it. You were saying there's now podcasts on Spotify, which of course, give more competition to music. But now there's also audiobooks on Spotify. And so not only do you use Spotify to listen to your music, but musicians have more competition now. They've got podcasts up against them, and then they've also got audiobooks now.
But they wouldn't slide into your music feed though, would they? Or are they?
No, but on my homepage, which used to feature so much music, telling me to listen to everything, it now tells me what books I'd like based on my music taste and what podcasts I'd like based on my music taste.
What weird kind of robot works that out?
AI, I think.
Okay, well maybe we should talk to someone who knows more about that than we do. Fuchsia Davidson is the digital accounts manager at the Network Music Group, which is a record label, a publisher and an artist management company. Charlotte asked her about how Spotify chooses your songs and how issues like geofencing interfere with that.
So what is geofencing? And is it a problem for New Zealand musicians?
It is. So geofencing is when artists are linked by location as opposed to the sonics of their music. Obviously, there are multiple things that dictate Spotify's algorithm, sonics being one of them, sort of social conversation being another. But one of the issues that we find with a lot of New Zealand artists is that they're linked to other artists that are also New Zealand-based who are making potentially similar music, but it's more so the fact that they are based in New Zealand, and that's why Spotify's algorithm is serving those artists together, essentially.
So sort of a cliche example might be if I'm listening to 660, I'll also be served up LAB because it's another New Zealand band with a sort of similar sound, I guess, and similar audience?
Yeah, similar audience. So an artist community, the easiest way to find this on Spotify is to go onto an artist profile, scroll down and have a look at their fans also likes. This is what we know as their artist community. And these are the artists that are most strongly linked to them by the algorithm. So, yeah, like you say, you're listening to 660, you haven't programmed anything next, and the first song that comes up is the new track from LAB. That's the perfect example of the algorithm working, but also working in a way that is potentially geofenced. We see this a lot, especially over my role. I also look after Australia and Asia. We see this a lot in Australia with artists that are popular on Triple J. You might be listening to an artist that you've heard on Triple J. The next artist that plays might not actually be, you might go from an indie pop track to indie rock track that doesn't sound that similar, but the only thing that these artists have in common is that they're both based in Australia and they're both heavily playlisted on Triple J.
So who creates those fans also like algorithms then?
So that's Spotify. That is all Spotify is doing in the back end. As I mentioned, there's sort of three things that play to this. Your sonics, social conversation on and off the platform. So that could be what a blog saying about the artist, who is the artist collaborating within their music, who are they chatting to on socials. Obviously, you know, a lot of people have their Spotify linked to either their Facebook accounts or the same email as their Facebook account. So that information is shared freely between the platforms. So they understand that, and then also their community on the platform that they've built as that fans also like. So yeah, the fans also like is their algorithm taking all that information, the sonics, the social information, and the playlisting and what others are listening to, and putting it into a list of artists that they feel closely represent each other. And if you like, say, for example, Leisure, you may also in turn like Neil Francis, or you might like Night Tapes, because they are artists that Leisure have toured with or collaborated with, but also there's that sonic similarity between them as well.
What about then as a music lover? Like for me, I want to discover new music, and if I was listening to 660, I already know LAB. You know, how can I manipulate, or is there any way I can manipulate the playlist or my algorithms so I don't just get geofence stuff? I can get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the algorithm's going to be there whether we like it or not. So I think the best thing to do is to work with it and give it as many prompts in the right direction as possible. So, I mean, something that is super valuable for artists and a great thing to do as a fan anyway is to follow them on Spotify. Then you get updated, obviously, when new music comes out, but it tells the algorithm, actually, I am invested enough in this artist to follow them and follow their journey. So following them on the platform, following them on socials. If you hear a song that you like, hit the like button. And all of this stuff, even if you're not using it to then go back and listen to your like songs, it's telling the algorithm, no, push me in this direction, as opposed to whatever it assumes that you may like. I think give it as much information as possible so that the recommendations that are fed to you by the platform are going to assist in your music discovery, as opposed to keeping you in this sort of like perpetual loop of local music.
Have you noticed a difference in your feed? Are you getting fewer up-and-coming Kiwi artists, or what's happening?
Maybe 3 months ago, it became very, very prevalent that my New Music Friday or so every Friday we get a new playlist given to us called New Music Friday, which features all the new artists and their singles that we should listen to. And we also get one called Release Radar, which is a more specific, curated taster of what we should be listening to. Anyway, on those playlists, we used to get so much New Zealand music in there. But about 4 months ago, there was so little New Zealand music, I knew something was up. It was quite weird. Like maybe one New Zealand artist would be in the New Music Friday, and they'd be right down the end of the list, number 18 or 19. And in music world, you want your track to be right up the top, you know. And so I started to get really suspicious, and I heard that someone at Spotify... First, I heard that it was AI that was, you know, creating these playlists, and that confused me because I was like, well, AI, no, I live in New Zealand. Why aren't I getting more New Zealand artists? But then I heard, oh, no, someone's gone on maternity leave and they're just not doing it anymore. And I thought that is so cruel to New Zealand musicians, that someone goes on maternity leave and somehow their whole life...
New Zealand disappears.
New Zealand disappears.
Mikey Tucker has also noticed a dip in the number of New Zealand artists on his curated playlists.
Why is the dip?
I don't know. I mean, I know that unfortunately when they lost staff globally, that Hannah Brewer from New Zealand On Air was one of the people let go in the global restructure. I don't think that's particularly the reason. I don't know the reason. We haven't brought it up with them. We've had the odd playlists. We're still getting the playlists we expect to get, and some surprises. So we're still happy at Loop.
Yeah, good. Because for you, getting on the playlists, is that how you feel like you break your artists? Like, is your intention to get on playlists on Spotify?
Yeah, it used to be more important than it is with TikTok and live music being the two main ways to break artists. Now it's kind of third or fourth on the line, but it is still important to generate, the groundswell and like the virality of a song through getting on a playlist. It definitely helps.
So TikTok is way more important than Spotify now to break an artist?
It's more important. It's not way more important. I mean, Spotify bring in 70% of their digital revenue. So they are, what Apple used to be, who had about the same market share at their peak in New Zealand. And then, of course, pre-Apple, there were CDs where it was 100% of the market. So there always seems to be a dominant player in the market. And right now that dominant player is Spotify. Have taken the mantle off Apple.
You were saying before that, sometimes these bands, that play to hardly anyone wouldn't even sell 100 units or anything like that. How do I discover those bands on Spotify, I guess? Because it's those, LAB, one of your artists, or even Anna Coddington and Rhea Hall, they do very well. But what about for one of those musicians that wouldn't sell 100 CDs? How do I discover them on Spotify? How do I get them into my algorithm?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think discovery is always a $1 million question in the music industry. It really is. But, we grapple with that every week in different meetings about how to break new bands, like smaller bands like Park Road and all the people coming through. We don't want to have the same old bands on the top of the charts all the time. So we're constantly looking for ways to break bands. All we can put it down to at the moment is that the two key things to break a band are their live performance and playing live in TikTok, and at Spotify, it's harder to discover there. Yeah. I mean, I think if you want to discover new bands, there's other alternative platforms to look for. But get out and see live music, I say.
Okay, so what happens if, you spend your Friday night on Ponsonby Road popping in to see the bands, and then you're looking for their music and they haven't bothered putting a CD out yet? Can you still find them on Spotify?
Well, if they've put their music on Spotify, you could, but then some bands are so disgusted with Spotify and, moralistically and financially, or, for financial reasons, that they won't put their music on Spotify. They'll put their music on Bandcamp, which Bandcamp's a great platform. They give a lot more money back to the artist directly. However, they're not an easy platform to use in a sense that, Spotify's brilliant because, yes, it feeds you songs, but you can also create your own playlists. You can share playlists with friends. They can add to that playlist. Like, it's a very functional sort of app. Okay,
so you're still buying their CD in the foyer and then driving your old car so that it's got a CD player and listening to the Ponsonby Road music. Bring back CD players in cars.
Bring back, I know, the quality of CDs. CDs are actually coming back because the quality is so, so good. Yeah, it's hard. That's my mission, is actually finding out how to still get delivered new music, because I feel like the music that I'm being delivered each week on Spotify isn't what I want. It's not working with me as well as it was 6 months ago.
But Charlotte, you're in touch with the grassroots New Zealand music industry. You talk to the musicians, you interview them, you're dealing with their managers, etc. If you can't get what you want from this, how is Joe Public going to work it out?
I know, exactly. That's my concern.
So if you don't want to use Spotify and you are looking for something new, something local, can you go to someone else? Could they go to you and find out from you who would be worth listening to?
I think that is the way around it. But then that's also curated as well. But yes, I think the way around it would be to find people to follow. So I have a profile on Spotify, so people could follow me and see the songs that I'm putting into my playlists. Or they could go to New Zealand On Air, and New Zealand On Air have a profile, and you'll see all the songs that they've funded go up onto their playlist. But there's not one good place that you can rely on. But I don't, there never was though. At a record shop back in the day, we'd go to one record shop and they wouldn't have what we wanted, so we'd go to another one. It is kind of like the old day. I don't know if we should complain as much as we should. Maybe we've had it so easy.
And records are so expensive. Oh, they really are. Vinyl records are ridiculous.
They have gone up so much. When vinyl started coming back, they were $35. Now, I don't know, I think the latest Beyonce is $120, or average good new release is $74 these days.
That's crazy. And then you've got to find somewhere to store them.
A shelf?
Take up a lot of room.
How many records in your collection?
Well, I don't know, because they're in the cupboard under the stairs.
Well, that's why Spotify's great. You have your whole collection plus everything more you ever imagined, plus the audiobook of the artist telling you about his life or their life.
Plus every episode of The Detail.
Plus
every interview Charlotte Ryan's done with the musician.
Music 101 interview podcast. I mean, yeah, we shouldn't be complaining because so much amazing content is right at our fingertips. But I guess for the musicians, which I'm sad about, is that when Spotify launched, it was all about the music, and now it's not at all.
Spotify is such a crowded house. Every day, 120,000 songs are released by the platform. There are 100 million tracks on there, and anyone can throw up a tune. There are no restrictions.
It's so crowded, and there's not a quality control, if I could be so blunt. And I believe that some people are making music to get in the algorithms, to be, to get into those algorithms, those
get into the right genre.
Yeah, there's chill playlists that do very well. There's an office playlist. There's all these sort of playlists to fit mood. So what I understand is that musicians, if we call them musicians, are making money to fit those playlists rather than that authentic, genuine, I'm going to make a song from my feelings.
You're just going to have to keep going to the pub on a Friday night, aren't you? Seek out these bands.
Seek out these bands. Yeah.
So, gazillions of choices, and yet lately there have been complaints about one artist in particular dominating people's feeds.
There's a debate going on right now about whether Spotify is falsely inflating Sabrina Carpenter's streams. Let's talk about it. Honestly, I thought it was just me. Every single time on Spotify, something I was listening to ended, an album or a playlist or whatever, it would start playing. Last month, it was Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter. And now it just autoplays, please, please, please. But then I saw this thread on X, and a lot of people are experiencing the same thing. The original post I saw on X said to like this post if Spotify was auto-playing Sabrina Carpenter for you, and 311,000 people liked it, including me.
Sabrina Carpenter is one of the biggest pop stars, or her record label want her to be the biggest pop star in the world at the moment. So they're basically doing anything they can to get her music into our feeds.
And it's working, apparently, because every second song is Espresso or what's it? Please, please, please.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange as well because I don't even listen to that much pop music, but that's coming into my algorithm at the moment.
So it's not even following your genre.
Well, that's the confusing thing.
So what are they paying immense amounts of money for these songs to be inserted into the algorithm?
I hope not. But yet record labels have a very, very powerful influence. The three major record labels, Universal, Sony and Warner Music, they're very influential. They are also investors in Spotify.
This year, that investment started to pay off, with Spotify declaring a second quarter gross profit of €1 billion. That's 1.75 billion NZ. But it came on the back of cutting 17% of its workforce, or 1,500 jobs. Since its launch in 2006, Spotify has struggled to turn consistent profits, burdened by licensing costs. But at the same time as that big profit was announced, Spotify CEO Daniel Ek stirred up some controversy.
The head of Spotify recently came out and basically said that content, quote unquote, is so cheap and easy to make that he just sees himself being the thoroughfare, I guess, for it. Whereas a lot of musicians got extremely upset by that because for them creating content for their album, it can cost thousands and thousands of dollars. It can, they're putting their heart on the sleeve. It's not just content to musicians.
Mm. Meanwhile, if you're sick of being dished up perpetual Sabrina Carpenter, here's a hack from Mikey Tucker to manipulate your Spotify feed.
I play the main song that I like and just let Spotify run from there for days and it will just take you into this great wormhole. So the Spotify wormhole still exists and it's great. I even did it last night. I started with a song I loved and it just took me, I woke up this morning, it was still playing downstairs and I'm like, wow, there are all these cool new songs that I haven't heard. So you just got to let it roll. That's one way.
Okay, so not go to their playlists, instead just play a song and let it roll.
Yes, that's my hack. I'll play the song that I like and then just from the single, and then Spotify will play similar songs to that from there. And the longer you let it roll, the deeper and weirder it gets.
That's it for the week. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. This episode was engineered by Phil Benj and produced by Gwen McClure and Davina Zimmer. Thanks to Charlotte Ryan, Mikey Tucker and Fuchsia Davidson. I'm Alexia Russell. Ka kite.